It is November 1st, 1755, and Lisboa has just suffered an earthquake of an estimated magnitude of 8.5, followed by a tsunami and 3 days of fires. The city is destroyed, ruined. You will play the role of an influential noble who has survived the earthquake. You will work with the architects to build Lisboa anew in order to gain influence. And the most important thing of all, wigs. Alright, so let's try and make this quick and snappy. A quick overview on how to play Lisboa. So the first thing I'm going to explain is your portfolio. So there's a lot of stuff going on, but once you get it, it's not too crazy. Starting on the left-hand side, you're going to have your warehouse. Now, on your warehouse, as you start the game, you have one of each good. You have tools, cloth, books, and gold. In this area, it is where you will collect rubble. Now, as I explained in the premise, Lisboa had an earthquake, followed by fires, and followed by a tsunami. So what you have then is you have 3 different types of rubble. You have earthquake rubble, tsunami rubble, and fire rubble. And so what happens here is when you collect one of each, that completes a set. And so you have space to complete 5 sets. Down here, you will have royal favor tokens. I'm not going to explain what that is just yet, but you can have one of each type. There are green, which correspond to the planner. You have blue, which corresponds to the marquis, and you have purple pink, which corresponds to the king. So you can only have one of each type on your board or your portfolio. This here is a quick rundown of the actions up here, which I will go through in a bit. And down here you have space for plans. You can have green plans or blue plans. I'll explain the significance in a bit. Here you have stores or buildings, and you will take these off once you build a store in Lisboa, which would be in this area. Now, if you played Mercado de Lisboa, you might be familiar with how this portion works. And it's not exactly the same, but it works similarly. Down here, you have your state officials. Everyone does have 8 state officials, but you will start with 1 in office. And down here below the individuals is the office spaces. And so the other thing too is you have clergy. Now, clergy tiles are ongoing effects, and so they vary. There's a ton of them, and in the rule book you can read what each one does. I won't explain that now, but okay, so that's your portfolio. Now I'm going to quickly explain what's on the board. So up here you have the 3 nobles. Below each of them you have 5 spaces for state officials to go, and underneath them, so these 2 actions on the ribbon, which you see here, are state actions. The action in the bigger area under each noble is the noble action. You can see all 3 have different ones. Everyone also has some royal favors. You have your color meeple up here. On the left-hand side, you have types of cards. You have cards for the builder, cards for the marquis, and cards for the king, as well as treasury cards. Down here, you have the influence track. First player starts at 4, second 5, third 6, and 7th, and the 4th player starts at 7. Here you have the treasury track. The treasury track tends to go up when you build ships, and tends to go down when you take money from the treasury. Here you have the clergy track, with clergy tiles. Now again, the clergy tiles allow you to have an ongoing effect if placed on your portfolio. In the building area, all these spaces around the perimeter on the top, left, and right are spaces for public buildings. Spaces in the middle are spaces for stores. You can see that all the spaces have rubble. I'll explain what the significance is in a bit. And over here you have plans. You have green plans and blue plans, and these plans are used to build public stores. So what's currently on the board is the store that can be built, but you can also see stores that are, or public buildings that are coming up. Here you have the worth of the goods. So gold starts at 6, cloth starts at 5, books start at 5, and tools start at 4. And here you have the shipyard, where construction is currently ongoing on this ship on top of the deck. Now everyone starts the game with 5 cards in their hand. There are 2 types of cards. There are noble cards and there are treasury cards. So I'm going to go ahead and explain a turn. So it is your turn and you have a couple options. Now you want to play this card. So there are a couple things you can do. One is you can play it to your portfolio, or you can play it to visit a noble. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how it works if you play it to your portfolio. Now, one thing that I didn't mention earlier is that you can have 3 cards on the top, and you can have 2 cards on the bottom. On the top, you will play noble cards and ships, and on the bottom, you will play treasury cards. There is a limit to how many cards you can have, and that is actually denoted by this number here. So this number here not only dictates how many cards you can have on your portfolio, but it also dictates how many of each type of good you can have in your warehouse. In this instance, I cannot have more than 2 cards in my portfolio total, and I cannot have more than 2 of each of these goods in my warehouse. The way to increase that is to collect sets of rubble. Once you have completed a set, which is an earthquake, fire, and tsunami rubble, you then remove your rubble marker to show an increase. So now I can have 3 cards in my portfolio and 3 of each good. Okay, so what I want to do with this card is I'm going to go ahead and play it to my portfolio. So the first thing I do is I have to have space for it, and I cannot exceed my limit. So I'm going to go ahead and play this card, and now before I slide it into my portfolio, I'm going to gain this reward immediately. In this case, I would gain a tool good. So you slide it under. Okay, and so that's the first part. The second thing you can now do is you can either sell goods or you can trade with nobles. Now, selling goods is determined by whether a player has a ship or not. If a player does not have a ship, or if you do not have a ship, you cannot sell goods, meaning the only action you can do is trade with nobles. And this is actually going to be a large chunk of the game, or what you can do. And so let me go ahead and explain that. When you do take the play a card to your portfolio action and you do decide to trade with nobles, the nobles are very important people. And so there are certain goods that they will take that will allow you to trade with them. The planner will take tools or gold. The marquis will take books or gold, and the king will take cloth or gold. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and take one of these actions, and I'm going to actually take the planner action, which is either the statesman. Actually, let's rewind. Now, before I take any further action, I'm going to go ahead and explain what each of their actions do. The marquis has the statesman action. And what this does is allows you to play 2 of your state officials anywhere on the board underneath a noble. Now there is a catch, and that is that you cannot play your 2 statesmen to the same office. So what that means is I can place one here, and my second one has to go either in the Marquis's office or the King's office. Now, state officials are important for a couple of reasons. One is that it increases the cost of other people visiting nobles. Now, I haven't explained visiting nobles, but just know that having your color there will increase the cost for other players to visit a noble. The other thing that officials are good for are to build public buildings. Now, to build a public building, you need a plan. And again, remember, there are green plans and blue plans. Plans can be built by using the number of officials listed on the plan. In this case, to build the current plan, which is this plan for blue, I would have to then have 2 state officials. Okay? And I'll explain building in a bit, but just know that to build plans, you need state officials. And so taking this action allows you to place officials on the board. And these officials must come from the office. Okay? That's the first action for the builder. The second action is taking a plan. So you can kind of see how things are starting to kind of collect together. So you need state officials to build plans. Now these plans, again, they are over here in a stack. If you were to take that action, you would take either the top green stack or the top blue stack, and you would move them over here. There is no limit to how many you can have, but green goes on green and blue goes on blue. Now these are state actions. I'm not going to explain the noble action just yet. These are also state actions, but these are state actions for the Marquis. This action will allow you to build a ship. Now what that means is you will come here, and whatever ship is currently under construction is the ship that you can purchase to build, or just purchase. And the way that these work is on the left hand side you have the number of crates that a ship can have, or the number of goods a ship can have, but it's also the payment. And in this case, the first just one is going to cost you 1 of any unique good. A cost of 2 would be 2 of any unique goods, all the way up to 4, where you would have to have 1 of each good to be able to purchase the ship. So the way it works is I'm going to go ahead and take the state action to build the ship. I'm going to take my ship, and before I slide it into my portfolio, I have to make sure I have enough space. If I do not have enough space and I have cards equal to my number, I can replace one of the cards currently on my portfolio. In this case, I have enough space, so I'm going to keep this card here. Now, before I slide it under, I'm going to take this immediate reward. So building a ship will increase the economy. After all, you are doing something good for Lisboa, and it will allow me to gain influence. Now, what that means is I will now gain influence equal to anything on the top row. So that means 1 plus 3. And yes, you do immediately count the ship's influence. And so that'd be 4 influence. And on this tracker, I'm going to go up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, you may have noticed on the influence tracker there is a wig. Anytime you hit 10, you will earn a wig, or a victory point. And that goes, again, if you were to go down in influence and go back up to 10. So you can continue to gain influence on the gain wigs on the influence track. Okay, so back to the ship. I've built the ship. Now I can hold up to 1 good before my ship sets sail, and I will explain that in a bit. The other state action you can take is you can produce. Now, in the beginning of the game, this action is unavailable because the only way to produce is to have stores of a certain type of good. I won't explain stores just yet. The other state action that you can take is for the king, and that is on the clergy track. Now, what this means is you can move the clergy meeple up one or twice. And why is that important? Because where you land is where you can take an adjacent clergy tile. So for example, if I were to land here, I would take this clergy tile and place it on my board. There are a couple rules about clergy tiles. The first rule is you cannot have more than 4. As you can see, there are 4 slots. The second rule is that you cannot get rid of them until you are allowed by the clergy coming all the way around back to where he started. Until that happens, you cannot get rid of any of your clergy tiles. Okay? So that is the clergy action. This action is the royal favor action, meaning that you will, if you were to take this action, you can take any of the royal favor tokens that you do not currently have in your portfolio. This would mean that I can take either a green builder royal favor token or a king purple favor token. You cannot ever have more than 1. And so those are the state actions. So again, to bring you up to speed, I played this card to my portfolio. I took what I decided to do was take a state action for the marquee, which was to send 2 officials to office. And so for doing that, I either have to pay with tools or gold. And I'm going to go ahead and take a tool good from my warehouse and just apply it there. What that indicates is that I took this action and I cannot take this action again on this same turn. Okay. The other action I took was to build a ship, and I'm going to actually go ahead and pay with a book good. And so those are the actions I've taken. So again, I placed the card down. I took 2 state actions, one action being state officials, and the other action building a ship. I placed the ship here, which then increased the treasury marker, and it allowed me to gain influence summed up by the number on top of all the cards. Okay? If instead of playing a noble card to the top of my portfolio, I wanted to play a treasury card to the bottom of my portfolio, I would first gain the immediate reward here, which in this case I would gain raise equal to the treasury marker, and then the treasury marker would go down because I'm taking money out of the treasury. So then the card would slide into my portfolio, and now I have this ongoing effect. In this case, blue rubble or tsunami rubble is affected. Its cost is affected by this ongoing effect. And same thing, once I've taken that action, playing a card to my portfolio, I can then either sell goods if someone has a ship, or take up to 2 state actions. The second thing I can do is I can discard a card to gain a gold good. And that's the only thing I would do that turn. A couple of other things about ships is the action where you can sell goods to a ship. You can sell goods to any ship on any player's board as long as they have space. In this case, the space is denoted here, so this first blue ship can only hold 1 good. If we look over here, the red ship can have up to 2 goods. So the way it works is I decide to sell goods by taking the play a card to my portfolio action, and so I choose to sell goods. So what that means is I choose one of my available goods and I will sell it, and so I will take it, I will sell it to the ship, and I will earn the current value listed here. So in this case, cloth would be worth 5 ray. So I would earn 5 ray. Now, once the ship has maximized or gained or filled up its hold, you will flip this over, and the person who owns the ship will then earn wigs. So there is a benefit to having people fill up your ship. You earn wigs as soon as your ship is full. Now what this indicates, it means the ship has now set sail to sell these goods elsewhere. Okay? Now, let's say everyone's turn goes around and it's my turn again, and this is my ship. My ship docks, I get rid of the goods, and now I can, my ship is ready to go again. And I can sell to my own ship. Okay? So I explained playing a card to your portfolio. I explained selling goods to ships. I explained the state actions. And now I'm going to explain visiting a noble action. So there are 3 nobles, and that also means that there are 3 noble cards. So depending on which actions I want to take, if I want to take this noble action, or this noble action, that will determine who I want to visit. But before I explain that part, let me explain these main noble actions. So the action for the planner is to build a store. Now, building a store is a multi-step process. The first step to building a store, which will be placed here, is to first decide where I want to place the store. Okay? And just for the sake of playing the game, I'm going to go ahead and just place it here. So placing it here you will gain this immediate effect. In this case, I would gain 2 statesmen. Okay? And again, statesmen allow you to build public buildings. So I place my store here. And now before I do anything else, I am going to have to take a rubble marker or a rubble piece from the same column, which would be here, the same row, or from the column. So the rubble markers affecting this store are down here in the same column and over here to the right on the same row. Now, why am I taking a rubble? Well, I'm building a store, and building stores, you use rubble. A big part of it was using rubble to build these stores. Now, these pieces of rubbles do have a value to them. Earthquake rubble has a cost of 3. Fire rubble has a cost of 2, and water rubble has a cost of 1. These things cost money, and removing earthquake rubble was very expensive. And so, again, I chose to build a store. I took my state officials. And now what I do is I take a rubble. And so this allows me to start completing sets of rubble. So in this case, I will take the fire rubble, and I will place it on my board. Now you can see if I had another red rubble piece, it would go here. It's always going to go on the leftmost available slot. Okay? So now that I've done that, now I have to pay for it. Okay? So what that means is the cost of building here is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, plus the current spot on the right side of the treasury marker. So it's going to cost me 10. Okay? It is going to cost me 10 to build here. So I pay the money, I pay the ray, and now what I do is I come over here and I choose a building. Okay? Now the way buildings work is there are 3 categories. 1, 2, 3. When you take from one of these categories, you always start from the bottom. And so these are ongoing special abilities. For example, if I were to take this one, nothing happens. But then when I take this one, I gain this reward. Okay? I won't explain what the rewards are. It's just a lot going on. In this case, I would start here. I would decrease the amount I have to pay for the ship. So the catch is, for example, these 2 categories, anytime there is a reward, it supersedes whatever came before it. So if I were to go all the way up and build up here, this reward now supersedes this one, and this one is no longer relevant. This spot here means nothing changes, so this reward would still be what you gain. Okay, So let's go ahead and say I want to build in the center category, or start there. And you don't have to complete it before you move on to the next one. So I'm going to take this one, and I'm going to place it on the store. Now, at this point, I would earn points, but that is based on public buildings. And as an example, let's go ahead and say I was building this public building, and let's just say it was already here. Okay, so because I built on pink, and this one has pink, right? I get a reward for that. Now, I can get a reward after the public building has been placed, and my store is already there, or if the public building is already there, and then I build my store. So you're going to get rewarded retroactively as well, if that happens to be the case. So in this case, to score the number of wigs that I earn for the store, it's going to be 1, because there's one good here that matches the good that I produce, and so that'd be 1 times the multiplier. Okay, so that'd be 4 points for this store. Now let's say there's already another building there. When I place a store, then that'd be 1, 2 times the multiplier. Okay, so that's 8 points. I'm gonna put these back for now. Okay, and that is building a store. Okay. So that was this action. Okay. This noble action is taking law decrees. Now, law decrees are over here on the decree board, and these are actually ways to earn wigs at the end of the game. There are a huge amount of them, and I'm just going to give you an example. For example, if you have the most stores that produce tools, you earn 5 wigs. Okay, this one would be if you have the most buildings or stores on row C, you would earn 2 wigs. So taking this action allows you to take a decree. Now, there is a special rule to that. If ever you complete a rubble set, meaning you have one of each rubble piece, you will take the rubble set and you will place it on the marquee. Now, when you take this action, you can then use this rubble set marker to take a second law decree. You are capped off at taking 2, so if you had multiple rubble markers, you can only use 1 to take 1 law degree. Or I'm sorry, 1 law decree, not law degree. Okay? And now I'm going to explain the king's noble action. And his noble action is to build a public building. Now, again, you need plans to build public buildings. Everyone does start with a random one, and you have to have enough state officials in office to play it. You can hire state officials, but that's not something you want to do. It's an expensive thing to do. Okay? I'll explain that in person if we get that far. You and I, friend. So in this case, I'm taking this action to build a public building. I have a blue plan that requires 2 state officials. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 state officials out of office and put them back on my portfolio. Okay. Then I'm going to go over here to the current building, and this is the current blue building that I can build. I can only build what is currently here. Now I can see what's coming up, but I can only see what's coming up. I cannot take that tile. So I have the building tile, and it can go anywhere on the left or the right side. The only time it can come up top is when it has a when the goods that are affected down here matches the exact color. So what that means is, let me get an example. That'd be something like this. So this would only go up here, or it can only go up there, rather. So I want to place this. Right now, I do have a store in pink, but it will not be affected by this because the options on the bottom, the goods on the bottom, do not match the good that I produce, that my store produces. So I'm going to go ahead and try and diversify, and I'm going to place it here. Now, before I place it, I gain the immediate reward. Okay, so in this case, I would gain a cloth. Good. I place that there, and I take these rubbles and I move them to my rubble set. Okay. And so if there were any stores, we would score stores. In this case, there are none. Okay. All right, cool. And that is building a public building. Okay. So back to what I was saying. This turn, instead of playing a card to my portfolio or discarding a card for a gold good, I'm going to play a card to visit a noble. In this case, I want to visit the builder. And so what I do then is I play a card here. In this case, I ignore both the top and the bottom rewards. I will place my marker. And what that signifies is that I am visiting, I have started visiting the noble. So I'm there. Before I can actually visit the noble, though, I have to pay influence. Now, influence is determined by the number of other colored meeples in the office. In this case, there's only one. That is not my color. Plus, wherever the treasury marker is on the left-hand side. So in this case, it'd be 1 plus 0. So it would cost 1 influence to visit the noble. So in this case, I would just go down 1. If ever my influence is at 0 and I want to visit a noble or use influence, I can use my wigs or victory points in lieu of influence. Okay, in that case, I'm not going to do that now. And so now what I can do is I can take 1 state action, and I must be able to take the noble action. I cannot visit this noble if I cannot take the noble action. Okay, so I've done this, I've done the state official, and I built this. Okay, so now what happens before my turn ends and before we remove that card is anyone who has a royal token a royal favor token the same color as who you're visiting, they are allowed to then also follow with a visit to the noble. You've made it easier for everyone else to visit the noble as long as they have a royal favor token. Okay? If no one has it, then my turn is over. We discard a card, or we get rid of the card. And so after every single one of these turns, the next thing you do, or rather the thing you do before you finish your turn, is you take one of the cards on the board. They are separated by their noble and by the treasury. And you would take one and put it back, and you will put it into your hand, so you end your turn with 5 cards. Okay? A couple things that I didn't mention when I was explaining them is when you're building a store, you will take a building from where you want to, depending on the type of good that you want to build or store you want to build. What that means is that if someone were to follow you and try and build after you, these tiles do not get replenished until after your turn is completed. Meaning that if you build a store by taking the visit a noble action here, and you decide to build a blue store or a tool store, if anyone visits or follows your visit, they cannot build a store of the same kind or that produces the same good. Okay, so they would have to build a store that produces a different good. Okay, and regarding stores, the action I did not describe was produce. So when you decide to take the produce state action, you will produce goods you would produce one type of good, and you can choose which type of good to produce based on the number of stores or however you see fit. Now what happens is, for example, let's say I had 2 buildings that produced cloth. I would go ahead and say, hey, I want to produce cloth this turn. In this case, I would take 1, 2. I would produce 2 cloths. And because I'm producing and increasing the supply, the value of cloth goes down by 1. Now, it does not go down by how many you produce, it goes down by the type that you produce. So because I produced linen or cloth, it will go down. I could produce 10 cloth and it will still only go down by 1. And so the value changes. The value will never go up, it only goes down. So there are 2 phases in the game. The first phase is period 1, followed by period 2. I know, very tricky. So period 1 ends when 3 stacks are gone, or when somebody has completed 2 sets of rubble. Okay. Once the end of a trigger has been completed, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to remove all the cards in the display. Each player receives 3 wigs for each set of rubble that they complete for each set. You can discard any ships that are currently in the yard and replace it with purple and brown ships, which is the next period. And then starting with a player who triggered the end of the period and going clockwise, you're going to discard any number of cards from your hand. So in this instance, I have a variety here. I have 3 cards, and I have a marquee, a king, and a planner card. And I can earn the reward of the bottom of 1 of each type of noble card discarded this way. So I can discard as many cards as I want, and if I have 1 of each, I can gain the reward on the bottom immediately. And then after that, everyone draws back up to 5 cards from the purple political card deck, and then we play with the brown cards here. Okay? And now, end game scoring, the part that everyone cares about. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to get points or wigs based on the sum of the whole of your ships. So in this case, I have 2 ships. The whole size is 3 and 2, so that'd be 5 wigs. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to get points from sets of rubble, with each set giving you 3 points, 3 wigs. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to score based on the number of buildings, or stores rather. So the person who has the most gold producing stores, 3 points, second place 2, third place 1, and last place nothing. Same goes for all the other types of buildings or types of stores. Then from there, we're going to go ahead and cash out any influence for raise, then earn 1 wig for each 5 raise you have rounded down. So here you go, you've cashed that out, and then you can divide by 5 to convert, to get points rather. Then you're going to go ahead and get points based on decrees, which are over here, and then you are going to get points for having the most plans in place. So once you complete a plan, it does move over here, and the person with the most gets 15, 10, and 5 for third place. Fourth place getting nothing. And then from there, you will get 2 wigs for each royal favor that you have on your board. Okay? And that, my friends, is Lisboa.